Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode in Adventures of Comprehension. In case you are new, my name is Ciera Harris. I am the author behind Ciera Harris Teaching. If you haven't done so already, you need to drop me a comment below. Let me know that you're here. Let me know what grade you teach, that you're going to be teaching next year. Let me know where you're from. I love seeing everyone's comments. We're going to be talking all about perfecting independent reading. So before we get into all that, I want to talk really quick about reading stamina because I want to debunk it. Reading stamina is not a thing, okay? I know it's really a big hoopla at the beginning of every year, specifically in grades K, 1, 2, maybe even 3rd grade sometimes, for, teachers to track reading stamina and try to build up reading stamina and all of that. But really, what is happening and where it's really needed is in those lower grades. It's not reading stamina, it's attention stamina that you're trying to build, right? Reading stamina is not a thing, and here's why. With the right book in the right reader's hands, reading stamina is fictitious. It goes out the window. We need to take better time at the beginning of the year and throughout the year to get to know our readers on a much more personal level, to figure out what makes them tick, what do they like, what do they not like, what do they want to read, and find what they have liked in the past and do some book pairing and book matching. It is our job to book match relentlessly for our students. If they are not showing stamina, it's not because they're not capable of reading for a certain amount of time. It's because they're not interested in what they're reading. If they have the right book in their hands, the stamina will come naturally. I have a boatload of information to help perfect your independent reading time in your classroom that I hope will be helpful. And I've got some freebies for you as well. So you're going to want to stick tuned all the way to the end to make sure you grab that link to get those freebies. All right, I want to preface all of this by saying independent reading is probably, if not the most important part of your daily routine, right? There is nothing more important in your classroom than letting your students read, especially if you're a reading teacher, right? If you teach math, you may disagree with that, right? But if you are an elementary or middle school reading teacher, the most important thing you do in your classroom is let your students read. This is uninterrupted, at least 15 minutes of daily reading time, okay? So first and foremost, the first thing you've got to make sure you do is it has to be in your schedule, right? It can't just be something that you do intermittently when you're transitioning from one activity to another, or, it's on the backboard as an early finisher. When you are planning out your reading block, you need to ensure that at least 15 minutes every day is a part of your reading block. If it's not, because either you can't figure out time to fit it in, or upper management, as I like to call them sometimes, administration, they aren't letting us fit it in, then it's time for some strong reflection and conversation in that school to figure out how can we get this a top priority? How do we make independent reading a top priority? So ways to make it work. Number 1, every choice is a good choice. Reading is reading. Do not get stuck on a student if they choose a book that is outside their level. If it's too easy or too hard, that is fine. If it is too easy, there's so much research out there that shows what those books can do for our readers. Building, decoding, fluency, working on identifying different reading skills and strategies on a book that's too easy, all still builds a reader's knowledge, all right? A book that's too hard, that's okay too, because it's going to allow the student to experience that productive struggle. If they get to it and they figure out that this is too hard for me, they're going to know that on their own, and they're going to do one of two things. They're going to tell you that the book is too hard and put it away, and that's okay. We're allowed to ditch books, and that's okay because we do it as adults. And then number 2, they're going to use their productive struggle and they're going to get through it, and they're going to become a better reader because of it. So there are so many positives that outweigh the negatives when it comes to letting students choose a book regardless of their level. Another reason book choice is so important is because you want to make sure that your student's voice is heard. All right. It does not matter if they want to read a graphic novel, a cookbook, a comic book, a magazine. Let them read. Whatever they're like, I want to read this, let them read it. Book choice is so important. Another thing when making it work, at the beginning of the year, it's really important to teach real reading versus fake reading. I love having this great discussion. I usually bring all my students to the carpet and we have a T-chart out and we really talk about what is fake reading versus real reading. And I know, that if you teach upper grades, you may think, that's a little childish, but there's a way to make it not childish. If you think about real reading versus fake reading and what's happening in your brain, you can really make this discussion really appropriate for 4th and 5th graders and up. So real reading versus fake reading. Fake reading is, reading the words but not actively thinking about what's happening. You've got distractions around you. You are, reading too quickly. You're not monitoring how fast you're reading. Different things like that. The real reading side is that you're actively reading. Your brain is making connections. I am visualizing while I read. I am accessing my schema and adding to it. So you can really put a lot of deeper components in that T-chart to make this whole discussion perfect for younger grades and older grades. But every year, it's really important to have this discussion to make sure students know the difference and that they know your expectations for what should be happening when they read. Another great idea, and this kind of goes along with real and fake reading, and I love this one. Teach your students about reading voices. Reading voices, there are 3 of them. Number 1 is distracting voice. Number 2 is an interacting voice. And number 3 is a reacting voice. So the voices in our head, right? Our brain is constantly thinking. We can usually hear it in our own voice, but we hear it in our minds. And when we read a book, either one of 3 of those voices is going to be happening. Either I'm reading the words on these pages, but I actually have a distracting voice, meaning the words are happening, but I'm thinking about what's going to happen at recess, or what am I going to eat for lunch, or what is football practice going to look like that night. That's a distracting voice. So that can easily go on the fake reading side of the T-chart. Then the 2 voices that are okay to have are an interacting and a reacting. An interacting voice is where the reader is interacting with the author and the words that are in the text, meaning they are making inferences, they're making predictions, they're using all of those reading skills and strategies to be able to interact with the story, right? Their brain is thinking about the text. And then a reacting voice is where they stop and pause, and maybe they're thinking beyond the text. They are asking themselves questions about what's going on and why. Or they're at the end of the text and they're trying to, summarize and figure out some answers to some questions that have popped into their mind about, what could be happening, what would the sequel look like, or things like that. So if you teach your students about these 3 different voices, then they can figure out in their own minds what is acceptable and what's not. Because if they hear voices in their head as they read, they may be thinking, oh, well, I'm thinking while I read, but one of those voices is a negative voice. And we want to make sure the students know which one to not allow while reading. Hey everyone, so sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure that you are loving the content coming from Ciera Harris Teaching on YouTube. So make sure if you are loving this to subscribe and also like and comment below. I would love to hear from you. All right, another way to make it work. One, I hope that we are not going to be using recording sheets or any kind of daily logs, right? Those are not going to help motivate our readers. what they do is they take the focus completely away from reading. So instead of reading for enjoyment and be learning to become a natural and involved reader, what I'm now reading for is to fill in blanks and boxes, right? And we're going to talk in just a second about ways to kind of help with accountability. But reading logs are definitely not it. There's no true reason for them other than to like keep your thumb on top of your readers. There are better ways to make sure your students are reading. And if you create the culture in your room that I know you want to have to fall in love with reading, believe me, they're going to read. You don't need any kind of log or recording sheet or paper for them to fill in. They're going to want to read, okay? All right, obviously we all know this one, but make sure to give your students some flexible seating when they read. I hate sitting at my desk and reading, right? This is a book that I want to read right now. I don't want to read it sitting right here at my desk. No, I want a comfy chair. I want to lay on the floor with a pillow, right? I want to curl up in a corner with a blanket or something. And I know there are restrictions and stuff when it comes to, fire codes and, bugs and other things, but figure out what your school will allow you to have and somehow make your room a very cozy, comfortable place to be. If anything, just let them sit wherever they want. You don't have to have all the stuff in the room. You don't have to invest money in flexible seating options or pillows or anything like that. Let them sit and lay wherever they want. Just having that freedom to be out of their seat and somewhere where I choose and I am comfortable is going to let their brains open up and let them relax a lot more, which means they're going to enjoy reading even more. All right. So the last piece, and this is a big one, this is kind of a controversial one, but I promise it's worthwhile, is let your students talk. And yes, I know you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to talk about whatever they want to talk about. Clearly, there needs to be some rule setting, some modeling, figuring out what this looks and feels like. But your students need to be able to talk about the books that they are reading, okay? They need to have time to process, especially if you're in upper grades, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, when they're reading these chapter books and there's a lot to process, they can't do that all on their own. They need to be able to bounce ideas off of other students and find multiple perspectives of what's going on. Maybe they have a question they need to clarify. So if your students are talking about the text, let them talk. Okay, you're going to know, you're going to be able to tell, right? When they're doing this and they're looking up at you and, they think they're sneaky, but we all know they're not. You're going to be able to tell. And when you set the precedent of, I want you to talk about your book. I want you to dig deep and really get to know those characters and really figure out their motivations and what makes them tick. I want you to ask questions and figure out, the what's, where's, when's, how's, and why's of your story. You're going to motivate them to read the book to then be able to talk about the book. So it all kind of works together. So let's talk quickly about what are some things that you can do to help hold your students accountable, because I know this is a big one and I know there's a reason why, right? We want to make sure everyone is doing what they're told to do. Everyone is doing what they need to do to improve. So here are a few things you can do that can help with that. Number one, this is a great idea to do, especially if you do a morning meeting of any kind. And that is to implement a routine called status of the class. You may have heard of it. It's a new kind of, and I wouldn't call it new, but it's a new little routine that teachers use to help ensure that their students are reading, because they have to then report back to the class about what they're reading. Status of the class is very simple. And actually, one of my freebies for you tonight looks like this. You could clearly make one of your own because all it is boxes. But what you do is each day or every other day, you don't have to do it every day, is you give every student like 15 seconds. And in those 15 seconds, they have to explain to you or talk to you about what they are currently reading. Now, obviously, in the younger grades where they're reading a lot of picture books, then they simply tell you the picture book that they read yesterday. Or if you do it at the end of the day, at the end of the day meeting or wrap up, they can tell you about the book they read that day. So students know that they're going to have to speak up and tell you the title or the author or the main idea or a quick, 10-second retell, then they're going to read the book because they're going to be put on the spot. So 10 to 15 seconds is all you need per student, and they go around and they share. When you get into older grades for second, third, fourth, fifth, and they're reading novels, then here's a great way to track whether or not your students are sticking with your book. So then on this page, what you're doing is there's a box for every student. You would type in their names or write in their names. And then you would write in what page number. So status of the class would turn into, I'm now on chapter 8, and this is happening with this character, and da-da-da-da-da. And then maybe 2 days later, you do another status of the class, and the same student goes, well, I'm on chapter 9, and da-da-da-da-da. Well, 2 days in one chapter, what's going on there? That's a red flag for you to be able to know I need to check in with the student. Their stamina isn't really working, or their motivation, I should say. Their motivation isn't really there to really, dig into this book and read through it quickly. So I want to check in with them. And so when you see this at the very bottom is actually a little box for you to write down the names of students who you want to check in with. So if you notice a student has nothing to say about a book and they're like, I don't remember, I don't know. Well, you'll want to check in with them during independent reading. And again, in the higher grades, if you notice a student just kind of, maybe they didn't finish the book and you notice the title has changed before you got to the very end, or they're not moving through the chapters like they should, those are all red flags as well. So that's a fantastic way to make sure that you're holding your students accountable without them having to do anything but read. Let me know in the comments if you've ever used status of the class, or if you haven't, if you think that's an idea that you'll try. Another thing, if you absolutely have to, if you feel like you must give them something to do, some kind of paper, pencil activity during independent reading time to hold them accountable, do this. Focus on the reader. Focus on what the reader is getting out of the story instead of making it about some kind of regurgitation of the story or a time to practice any kind of reading skill, right? You don't want to turn it into an assignment. Instead, turn it into a very open-ended questioning time about them, about the reader. So you just read this book. How did this book make you think? What questions did you have? What's your response to it? Did it make you change your thinking about anything in any way? Did you make any cool connections to it? Make it about them instead of skills, strategies, and regurgitation of the actual story. Okay, then you keep it very open-ended. Everyone has something to say, and you're getting a lot more information and maybe, a lot more motivation to actually do the assignment and read the books than if you were to do one of the others, okay? Also, this is a little side tip, and it kind of goes along with it. Reading independent reading time, sorry, I flipped those words, is a great time for you to be conferencing with your students. I love doing reading conferences. Just checking in, pulling them over to the table or actually going to their desk, asking them what's going on, what are they reading, and then you can ask some more specific questions that are more reading strategy and skill based in that moment to be able to take some notes, listen to them read, figure out if, did they pick up on this inference that I just noticed, or have they picked up on a trait of a character, or maybe there was a few decoding issues in there that you want to note. So when they read for 15 minutes, I can squeeze in 3 to 4 conferences, and I can meet with almost every student every week of the year. So I get a lot of data, more than I get on my end of the week assessments when I meet with my students during independent reading time. And it's so casual. I just have a notebook and a pen, and we have a conversation. I don't have any kind of forms or anything like that. I just want to know what's going on with them while they read. Super easy, okay? All right, let's finish up tonight with, I've got some 2 little fun ideas on ways that you can help motivate your students. Number 1, of course, is doing book talks. Book talks are fantastic. You want to get your students really excited about the books you have in your classroom. They have no clue what's all there, right? If you've got hundreds of books, which I hope we all have, right? In our classrooms, or at least have access to at the library, then your students have no clue what's out there. So taking time once or twice a week to do a book talk and really showcase all the new really cool, exciting picture books or novels or graphic novels that you've got in your classroom, book talks are a fantastic way to do that. If you need more information about book talks, I do have a book talk blog post, and it's linked in the video description as well, that you can go and check that out. That way you know more about that. And then one of your freebies tonight is a book talk planning page. Book talks take a little bit of thought process beforehand because you want to make sure you know exactly what you want to say and why you want to say it about the books that you're presenting to your students during a book talk. But I promise you it's like a 2-3 minute process. Like, it's not going to take time. And they're so motivating for your students to show them what's all in your library. And if you buy new books from Scholastic, or you went to a garage sale or a bookstore over the weekend and you bought some new books, a great way to introduce them to your classroom and let them know that they're there is through a book talk. Another great idea is to allow your students to do their own book clubs, right? We know that letting students talk during reading is important. We know that students are motivated when they want to talk to each other or read with each other. Why not let them form their own book clubs during independent reading time? And it doesn't have to be a book club where people have, certain characters and certain roles and this and that, but let students read the same book. And, I'm reading Charlotte's Web and I want to read it with my best friend. Why not? So you can do something as a sign-up page. You can make it more formal like that, or you can just encourage your students to, read the same book as their neighbor if they want to. This may be something more for upper grades because picture books are really hard to have, 2 copies of. So this may be more of an upper grade thing, but it's a great way to get your students really motivated to read with a friend and have someone to talk to about the book. Another freebie, and I meant to mention this earlier when I was talking about reading conferences, but another freebie I've got for you tonight are my goal-setting bookmarks. These, I love having them cut on cardstock and ready to go. It's a great little task for a parent helper to make you a whole bunch of them, and that way you've just got them, on your reading table. And then when you go in independent conference with a student, then you can set a few goals with them. You want them to work on this decoding, look for these kind of decoding words or decoding skills, or maybe you want them to work on their fluency, or look for these kind of pieces of evidence for character traits, or whatever the goal may be. But you can use these bookmarks to fill them out with the student and give them, that way they have something to walk away with during those conferences. Let me know below. I want to know which tip is your number one. What can you not wait to try with your students when it comes to independent reading? What was your biggest takeaway from tonight? I'm going to go back and read all the comments and questions and respond to every single one of them. So keep them coming, even after I say goodbye. And thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.